Welcome to the Turn on the Music podcast. My name is Kyle. I'm joined here with CJ. How are you doing this evening, sir?
Doing all right. It's been a little tiring few days, but
Sure has.
It's good. It's good to be here behind the mic and speaking with you and getting back to talking about the book.
Yes.
How are you doing, Mr. Multiple Microphones, computers, and all that other jazz?
My brain is spinning. So for those that are not watching this on the YouTubes, we are going to start doing these on the YouTubes as well. So if you want to see us do the podcast,
I'm sorry.
You can go to our first. Yeah, sorry. You can go to our YouTube channel and you can browse our YouTube videos, and we will. So starting this past Monday. Actually, it's a week ago Monday now. We uploaded the first episode of the podcast on YouTube. There was no video. It's just a static image. The first 3 episodes will be like that, but this is the first episode with video. And it was a little bit of a nightmare to set up. I've got 2 microphones in front of me. I've got 2 computers running, one for video, one for audio, and yeah.
That's just because you like to make things difficult for yourself?
No, because I'm cheap. I don't feel like buying another computer. I just bought a new computer. I don't want to buy another.
That's why I said it's because you like to make things difficult for yourself. Difficult.
I suppose. So, episode 3, episode 4. Oh boy, is technique for the music. But before we get there, what are you listening to today?
Actually, excuse me. I've been listening to Victor Wooten a lot.
Nice.
I actually started with his... It's funny how when you go into the different streaming apps, because we use Spotify when we do certain things, but I have Apple Music, so I tend to sit in there. And it's interesting how they show the majority of his albums, but like... so his first one, which was... can't think the title.
A Show of Hands.
Show of Hands, and then it was What Did He Say? Mm-hmm. And then after that was
Yin Yang.
Yin Yang. Now, Yin Yang is easily found on Spotify. So when you go to Apple Music and you type in Victor Wooten and you bring him up and you go to his albums, you don't see that right away. At least on the mobile app. I had actually searched for the actual album name in order to bring the album up. It's just very weird how all that is not there. Like his album should have been just there.
Yep.
So I've been trying to listen to them in almost an order.
Okay.
Of when they came out, just to see, because we talked a little bit about his progression and his music.
Yep.
When we were live on Twitch, and you definitely can hear it even in the first 3 albums. You can hear the difference. So that's what I've been doing. And
even
then
the first 2 albums, you can hear the difference.
Oh yeah, huge difference. And then today, which I text you, I said, what do you listen to when you need to kind of like zone out a little bit, even if you're at work? And you recommended Rachmaninoff's Vesper, which I did not realize at first that it was going to be a choir. And typically I don't listen to choirs. And it was good. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, one of my favorite tunes.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to listen to the whole thing, so I'm going to actually probably go back to it tomorrow and finish it up. Yeah,
it's 45-ish minutes of a cappella Russian choral music. It's absolutely gorgeous.
Right. It actually was. As soon as the first movement came out, I was like, wow, this is really pretty. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate the recommendation. How about yourself? What do you listen to?
Yeah. Same stuff. Yeah. Punch Brothers, Nickel Creek. So
it's like you sit in that pocket for a while.
Mm-hmm, I do.
Yeah. And I do the same thing with like, you sit in that pocket of music for a while, and then like you get to a point where you almost start repeating it over and over and over again, and it doesn't get boring though. It's weird.
No, it doesn't. Not at all. And I'm really interested in trying to do some of the the tunes on the Punch Brothers album. I'm thinking about trying to figure out how I can pull it off. I think it'd be fun to try.
On what instrument? Piano?
I don't know. That's what I think. The piano. I think we like the record of the Edmund Fitzgerald that starts that like bass like eerie thing. Like, could I pull it off on the piano? Like, how would I make that work?
There's so many layers you could do.
Right.
And I have a soprano sax. I can make things sound eerie.
Yeah. And my first thought was, if you've watched the Piano Guys video, they do like the Angels we have heard on high.
Yeah.
And where they take the bow, they take the tip of the bow off, and they like actually like do those little like things. So those are on YouTube. You can see this little hand motion, but they actually like bow a string on the piano. I thought that might be kind of cool to try and do that, but I don't know how to do it yet. So I have to get the piano tuned first, and then
you got to get a bow and cut it up.
Rosin. And,
well, can't you just buy the strings? The horsehair, can't you just buy the hair or whatever the hair is? I
don't know if I can. Yeah, I'm sure I can find it online, sure. But I think it might be easier to rosin it with a bow, because you can put tension on it, then rosin it up, and then let it go, and then
I see what you're saying.
Use the bow to kind of keep it.
They do have a bow. I think it is attached to the bow.
It is attached to the bow. Yeah,
it is attached to the bow. Interesting.
So I'm thinking about maybe talking to Rachel, see if she has an old bow that she's got laying around that she doesn't want.
Can I destroy this bow? Yeah. Are you okay with me destroying your bow?
I need one of your $2,000 bows. I'm going to just smack the tip off it.
Just going to take my hacksaw to it and see what happens.
Yeah. So that's what's kind of floating through my head is how do I make that stuff work? My two favorite tunes are the record of the Edmund Fitzgerald and Orphan Annie. So
the record of Edmund Fitzgerald is a great tune.
Yeah. And
it's so weird to listen to it after watching a paranormal show go through that. Like that makes it even eerier. Mm-hmm. And for what they went through in the episode. So that's a good song.
Mm-hmm. It sure is. All right. So shall we get to the book?
Yes.
I
have a question before we go into the chapter. It's related to the chapter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I've been listening to it on audiobook as well, because that's sometimes the easiest way for me to get it into my head. But then I go back and I read through the chapter and I highlight the things that kind of stuck out to me. So when it said technique, I'm like, what am I really going to pull out of this chapter? Like, is there anything really that's going to come out? Because when I listen to it, I'm like, okay, they're talking about technique, right? And then I listen to it a second time because like, let me put it back in my head. And I'm like, oh, I missed that, and I missed that. And then I read it, I'm like, oh, I missed that, and I missed that. And I'm like, this is a pretty long chapter.
Yeah.
And by the time I got to it, I was like, wow, I circled a lot more than I anticipated in this. Did you feel that way with this chapter?
Yeah, I did. I mean, the problem is this book it's probably easier to tell you what I didn't highlight in this book. Because there's just so much, and like on the Kindle, when you do it on the Kindle, like it shows you like the spots that other people have highlighted and how many people have highlighted it.
Right.
It's like I've highlighted a lot more than those people.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is the technique of listening to the audiobook is not as good as the technique of reading the book in terms of gathering information and.
I'm gonna say yes and no to that for the simple reason that I'm driving when I'm listening to it. So there's some of my focus is on the fact that I am driving a vehicle that I don't want to swerve off the side of the road. But yes, I think that there are missed elements when you're listening, because when you're listening, you can kind of zone out. Right. And it's not music.
And what's funny, go ahead.
It's not music that you're zoning out to, because when you zone out to music, you can kind of like listen to different parts to it. It's a book, so there's not much going on. Now, with this chapter, there's actually a lot of music in the background as they're talking, and then it kind of cuts out. So it was very interesting how this chapter was done. But yes, it's a little bit different when you're reading it, because you do catch certain phrases and stuff.
Right. And what's interesting for me, the second book, I read it first and went, I don't know what I would highlight in this book. And then I listened to it and I went, I was wrong. There's a lot I got to highlight. I've got to go back and do it. So
It's the inflection of his reading too.
Right.
Because he's reading his own words, so he really puts emotion into the words.
Right.
You know, and we'll I'm sure as we go through this chapter that'll come across. Mm-hmm. So please begin.
As I try to maneuver the book around the microphones.
Just just cover your face on the camera. No one's going to complain.
Okay, but see, the problem is when I do that, it's too dark to read. So it's like, can I go like this and still? I don't know. I have to figure this out. You go first while I try to figure this out.
So, as we said, this is measure 4. The name of the chapter is measure 4. And there's usually like these little lines that are taken out of the chapter, and the line that's taken out right at the beginning says, "Are you using magic?" And the response is, "Yes, I am." It's called technique. Mm-hmm. So I actually highlighted the first paragraph in this chapter, and the reason why is it does continue on from the previous chapter, where the previous chapter ends in such a way where it's kind of like boom, here we go, like they're going to move forward. So the first paragraph reads, "I was speechless."
Before you go on, because I was listening to the podcast this week, and we didn't touch upon what I thought was a really interesting thing, and the fact that we both missed it in terms of reading it. I thought so. The whole chapter is about articulation and duration. What we didn't talk about is how they related the tracking and the footsteps of the animals to notes.
True.
And because I think it's really interesting. So I've said, and we've agreed that, that music is a language. And I've said that I could go over to the piano, which is not set up tonight, so there's no way I'm going to do this tonight. But I can go over and play a chord and say, "You sing the next note," and I can influence you to sing the next note.
Right.
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 So with the notes or the tracks in the grass, you can see where the tracks are leading and where so it's almost like the notes pushing you somewhere. So you can tell the direction of the animal.
Right.
If they're turning,
right.
And you can tell the speed that they're running judged by the depth and how the foot hits the ground. So it's really interesting if you think about it that way, how that relates for me to music, like how that, how I see, the notes on the page or like hear a phrase, I can tell where it's going and where it's been. And, play around with that and, influence people to do things. So I just wanted to bring that up before we moved on.
And that's a good thing to state, because it's really funny because at work, I've learned people's steps. Mm-hmm. So when someone's behind me, I know who they are, because I've learned the sound of their gait when they're walking. Mm-hmm. Because everybody at work walks pretty much at the same speed at all times, except unless they're rushing to go somewhere. And that's on a very,
right.
I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm not saying they don't rush, because it's just the nature of the business. You're not rushing unless it's something really critical happens. So many of times my coworker would be walking behind me, and I'll be like, "Hello." And they're like, "How do you know it's me?" I'm like, "I'm listening to your steps, the gait of your steps. So I know that it's you. So after a few steps, I know that you're the one that's behind me, because we all have a different step." It's like
the lady at the front desk does that too. She can hear me coming as I'm walking. "Hi, Kyle."
So it's very true that's funny that we didn't mention that, because there's a whole big thing about that. It's definitely good bringing it up. Sometimes you bring up smart things.
Yeah, not often though.
So.
All right, go ahead. Continue. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, not at all. So the first paragraph of measure 4 reads, and this is Victor reading. "I was speechless. I stood there for a moment, letting his words linger in my mind. A breeze blew across my face as he turned and walked away. It chilled my skin. Somehow I felt his words were connected to the breeze. I can't explain it, but it was as if his message was carried through the air and into my ears by the wind. And like the wind, it hit before I could see it coming." It's such a poetic paragraph.
Right.
And it's so true sometimes that you're just sitting there and like the wind just hits you and you're just like, there's like more to it than just wind hitting your face.
Right.
And for you, your bald head.
Yes. And it's funny. I was driving down the road. So we hit 80 today, so I had the top down the Jeep, and I was driving, and all of a sudden, like the wind like punched me in the head. I was like, whoa, it was. So the wind was not as gentle as the breeze was to Mr. Wooten over here. So
that, I just thought that stood out because of the fact that there's a lot of conversation in the book, and that there was just something that kind of like caught him off guard. So that was in the first kind of change. I don't know if there's anything on that page that still stands out to you, but
no, I actually don't have much until page 78. So
okay, so I actually have a thing on 77 that stood out, okay. And then look, two things. So he goes in. It's the idea of Michael created a fire by rubbing sticks together, and Victor goes, "How did you do that? Are you using magic?" And he goes, "Yes, I am. It's called technique. Without proper technique, nothing can happen." And it's very interesting because I thought about that for a second. Because if you think of a magician, it's a sleight of hand technique half the time,
right?
Right? I guess there's this whole belief that there is some magical form to it, and depending upon what you believe in, there may be something. But in most cases, there is a sleight of hand or a technique that they're using in order to create this illusion that plays a trick on your mind. So I thought that was very interesting that he connected this magic and technique. And then at the bottom, this stood out to me because I think this is something that I've always kind of struggled with when it even came to playing like piano. Michael says, use both hands equally. Most musicians favor their stronger hand. They may never realize it, but if the problem is not corrected, it will surely hinder their progress. And here, as he points to the sticks, if the problem is not corrected, you'll never make a fire. And it's so true, because you can learn something wrong. And that's something that I think we forget is possible, especially when we're teaching. And I'm saying this in all aspects. Yep. You could say one thing wrong, and that one thing may stand out, and that may be the one thing that keeps the person from learning the next thing. Right. Or they just harp on it, or they sit on it, and because they learned it that way, they don't realize they're learning it wrong. So I thought that was a very interesting say. And it's not that he said that you made a mistake or you screwed up and you're never going to fix it. It's just that that's what you work on. You work on that mistake versus realizing you got to fix it.
Exactly. Yep.
So I will... that brings us to 78, so I'm curious of what you got on there.
So, I feel like it's like I'm an old person trying to like read with new glasses. Well, it's like, how do I angle the book?
It's pretty accurate for you.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I can barely see anyway. So, it's towards the bottom of the page. It says, eventually you will even forget about your bass. Only then can you remember how to play music. Think about talking. When you talk, the words are your notes. Your tongue, diaphragm, mouth, teeth, lips, and so on are your instruments. How you use them to push air across your vocal cords and through your lips to form words is your technique, but you rarely think about that. So one of the things that I've struggled with is technique. And I remember when I was in college, my first piano professor harped on my technique, but she never explained to me why my technique was wrong.
I know.
She just told me it was wrong. I didn't know how to fix it.
And there was no way given to you to fix it.
Right.
Yes.
Right. It was just wrong. And it was frustrating, and, I lacked that showing, and my technique on the piano has grown tremendously. I have big hands and very heavy hands. So I prefer pianos that have very heavy action.
Sure.
Because, it's just,
Right. Yeah.
That's just the way I play, So not having that background and technique really bothered me. And it was my second teacher at Post that first started teaching me about technique. And then that grew. And then I realized that, I was starting to focus too much on technique. And the technique was consuming me, and I was not being musical anymore. And I think that's what this is all about. Technique is really important, but when you get to a point where it overshadows everything else, in the beginning of the book, they talk about all these, elements being equal. And, focusing too much on one of them pulls back from the others. And technique, and they'll talk about in a little while how to make technique become second nature. That's what I've started to focus on. Learn the technique, and then how do I do it without thinking?
Right.
Because that's what we do when we talk, or we walk. I mean, they bring that up in the chapter too. It's when you're walking, you're not thinking about all the muscle movements that go into actually walking.
And it's like any language. I'm
right.
ASL being my wife's family's main language, just watching them sign sometimes, you're just like, it's crazy because it's so second nature to them. It's so there's no thinking about the process. They just sign and there's the language. So I'm going to bring you up a few lines, sentences. And I think it goes to what you're saying. Good technique allows you to use all the other elements of music at will. So it's not that you're getting rid of it. It's just that you need to take your focus off of it in order to be good at it. Which I know they explain more, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that more as we move on. And that's the thing I feel on the saxophone. Like, my techniques are not horrible, but I know I could be better, and I know I could have a better technique, which would make me a better player when it comes to, let's say, jazz music.
Right.
Like, I could play classical music well, but I can't do jazz very well.
Right. There are a few techniques in that list that I guess impact or relate to others. Technique is one of them. There's a technique to playing notes. There's a technique to tone. There's a technique to articulation.
Oh, you mean in the element list?
To phrasing. Yeah, the element list.
Okay.
So each one of those has its own technique.
Yes.
And there are, I think, the few elements that relate to all of them. One of them is technique. The other is listening, and the other is phrasing. As far as that goes, like the other ones, they really kind of stand by themselves, I think.
Right.
Notes are notes, rhythm is rhythm, but there is a technique to learning how to play rhythm. There is technique to producing notes. There's a technique to the tone of the notes. So I think technique is interesting because it does relate to all of the different elements, and not just its own self.
Right. And I still think it comes down to learning how to do something and then making it your own. Right. And they do. Well, I'm sure they'll talk about it, but even previously in the book, like he says, it goes to the point where, you're gonna learn how to do. It's like doing something over and over and over again. But I'm skipping steps. Is that okay? He goes, it's okay if you skip steps. I don't know. Is that in this one, actually? It is in this chapter. I think I'm a little ahead of myself. No, I'm a little ahead of myself.
Yeah, so. I think it's in this one. I read 2 chapters this week, so it could be in the next chapter.
No,
it's
okay.
In this one.
Do you have more within these 2 pages, 78 and 79?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of overflows into the next page, but towards the bottom and once on 79, it says, when learning music, we think we need to concentrate really hard on something until we achieve success. We also think we should lock ourselves in what we call the woodshed for at least a few hours each day and focus on what we are doing. We practice our scales or modes techniques over and over until they become second nature. This, we think, is the only way of attaining the level of master musician. I propose a different path. And then he says, when we are playing music at our best, are you concentrating? Do you want to have to concentrate every time you do anything well? No, you don't.
And it's funny because you passed a part that I was wondering if you were going to say it or not. Above that paragraph that you just read, when learning music, he talks about when you learn about speaking and your parents didn't lock you in the room to make you work 3 hours a day on how to speak. It says you learn to speak through natural process. And he says musicians could benefit from looking at this process.
Yep.
It's in a sense of, as a musician, you are looking at this way of, okay, I got to sit here. I got to learn my scales, as he says in the next paragraph. But what if you don't look at it that way? What if you change that idea and that thought? I mean, look at Charlie Parker. He learned by going up to the side of a building, listening to a person play, and then trying to work it out himself.
Right.
Like, he didn't have a technique. Now, I understand a saxophone, there's a pretty straightforward technique, but they're still blowing into the reed. They're still making the sound work. They're still making sure you're in tune. There's still a bunch of things that play a factor. And he did this by ear. There's a lot of musicians that do things like that by ear.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And one of the things that Victor is big on, and I think Michael is too, obviously, is that we don't teach music as a language. You know, when you get, you have a kid come in for their first lesson, like, what's the first thing you do? Like, you show them notes, but like, when do they like play? They don't really.
And I'm curious, and I know this can be a longer conversation, so it's more of a touch, and maybe we can tap into it a little bit more at a later time. But sitting in a lesson, I've fallen into that path where it's like, okay, we're going to learn these notes. This is part of that is learning how to read the notes,
Right.
but I feel like sometimes, and I feel like I could go back in time and sit in that situation again and say, blow into the horn. Don't worry about what's on the page at the moment. Just sit down, hold this note. I don't care which one. Just pick one and go.
Yeah.
Like, instead of them saying that's a G on the note, that's a B, and that's a D, so play G, B, D. No. I wish I could have gone back and go, just blow. Get a sound out of the horn. Let's go from there.
Yep.
Play around with it. Get a feel for it. Yeah.
And what's funny is I've been watching, I mentioned this a while back, but I've been watching some trumpet videos, and how people are starting to teach trumpet now, and I kind of did this when I was teaching my brass instruments, but so on a brass instrument there are multiple notes that you can play without any fingers, right? So for instance, the trumpet, the first three notes that you can play on a trumpet with no fingers are C, G, and C.
Okay.
On a French horn, it's different. It's C, E, G, B flat, C, D, and then a whole bunch of others. But, and typically what happens is when the kid starts playing on the trumpet, they start playing on a G.
Right.
Well, the first note that every single book talks about is the C below it.
Interesting.
So it's really weird. So because every kid that I taught started on the G, but everyone wants you to play a C, so you can play in the key of C. So you don't have to worry about key signatures and stuff like that. Works better when you're in band. But what they're starting to learn now is that part of the problem with the trumpet is people when they see high notes, they freak out. Well, really, that G that they start on, that's the middle of your trumpet range.
Right.
But what's happening is they're teaching C, and that becomes the middle, even though it's the bottom end of the horn. So they get so used to playing so down low that they don't think about how to play higher.
Their amateur doesn't adjust.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah.
That's interesting. That's very interesting. Yep. Like the natural initial blow of the horn is a G.
Yep.
And that's because then to get down to that C, you have to loosen your lips a certain way.
Yeah.
Which then, that's interesting. Because there's a little bit of a muscle in there.
Yes.
There's that's right. That's interesting. See, we pull away from the natural and we force the unnatural.
Right.
And then that forcing that unnatural takes,
because everything is focused around notes.
Right. Right.
But then again, I mean, if you think about it in terms of the way a band works, you really kind of want everyone to play in the key of C because kids freak out over black notes. But is that how we're teaching? How many times do you start a student in the key of C sharp with 7 sharps? You don't. But why not? We make it harder on them.
Right, because you give them the fear of the note.
Right.
You give them the fear of the note. Right. Because you look at a sharp and you're like, there's 4 of them there.
I got to remember this through the whole measure.
I know, right? Yeah, it's one of those things.
Or if it's in the keys, I had to remember this the whole song. Come on, man.
As an adult, I still feel that way, but still.
Yes.
I gotta remember to start the car and put it in I gotta remember to take my keys out before I lock it. So, not that I've done that recently. Last week.
Yep. So later on, he says, concentrating or focusing is great for projecting your thoughts or your will. This usually means closing down the mind in a way that shuts out all other factors except for one thing, the thing that you're attempting to achieve. And that goes back to what I was talking about. When I was focusing on my technique, I shut my brain out to focus on my technique. I didn't think about music. I didn't think about anything. It was just, how am I playing? And my brain being the way my brain is, stupid, it's yelling at me that my technique is still bad, even though I'm thinking about it. So it was so counterproductive. And that's why I don't think I made much progress at all.
And it's funny because you're talking instrumentally as a vocalist, and I say that, I mean, I went to school for this. There's a technique involved in singing and properly hitting the notes. And as a singer, a lot of people don't think, oh, you're just a singer. It's not always natural. It's not always something that happens. And I'm not saying that there aren't natural singers out there, but there's still a technique to breathing. There's still a technique of doing certain things that allow you to be able to sustain a note, to hit a note, to get down low, to get up high, or whatever the case would be. And it's funny, you wouldn't think about practicing and focusing on technique while you're a singer, but you are. And there have been plenty of times that I focus so much on where I need to place my voice in order to do this and do that. I mean, I kind of ran into that when we were trying to do something at your house when I was there in Ohio. Like, I was focused on the wrong thing in order for me to properly do what I wanted to do. And when I kind of turned that off, I was like, oh, well, there we go. You know, it's like, you know, and even now, like, if I'm in the car and I listening to something, I decide to sing into it. If I don't think about the fact that I'm singing to it, it doesn't hurt. It doesn't feel like I'm straining. It doesn't anything. But if I take the time to actually think about it and focus on it, that's when I start making those mistakes and whatever you want to call them. And you're just like, oh, I can't do this. Like, yeah, that's so poignant to life. On that same page, I don't know if you have more on that same page, but
I do.
Is it continuous from that point?
A little bit further down.
Okay, go ahead, because it might be the same thing I'm talking about.
I have when it is time to receive information, opening the mind works best. It is like taking the power of your mind and opening it up to whatever information is out there. The mind cannot achieve its true potential until you have mastered each of these techniques. Like yin and yang, which we brought up many times, they work together to complete the whole. If you do not want to have to concentrate every time you play your bass, every time you play your bass, you should not have to concentrate every time you practice.
I did the same time every time I read that chapter. It's such a weird break in the sentence.
It is,
and and that's exactly the next thing that I was going to get into. And that still goes to your point that you closed your mind to everything else while you were practicing your technique. And because you closed your mind to everything else, you probably didn't practice the way you needed to practice for your technique.
Right.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's very interesting. And there's so much more that they get into with the brain. So I don't even know what to say, because it's just going to start talking more about stuff. Do you have more after that you feel, or do you have anything you want to add to what you just read?
They get into it later on, I think. Where is that?
I have something at the bottom of 82 that I kind of underlined.
Yeah, go for it.
So at the bottom, it's the last paragraph on this page. So he goes, like smoke, like this smoke, knowledge is near. So mind you, at this moment in the scene, he created a fire, and there's smoke coming out of wherever he created this fire. Like this smoke, knowledge is in the air. All the knowledge that ever existed or ever will exist is already there, right here, right now. If you can tune into the correct frequency, you can pick up any information you want. We think the brain creates knowledge, and this is what I think is very interesting. We think the brain creates knowledge, but I'm here to tell you that the brain creates nothing. The brain receives, or more accurately, it discovers. And then he continues to say, and towards the end of this paragraph, he goes, the brain can receive information and then use it, but create it, no. And it's very interesting because I looked at this as an artist who likes to draw and paint. And you're like, well, I'm creating. But I'm creating based upon things that I already know. Like, it's not like I'm sitting here going, oh, I'm going to, like, it's coming from something I know already. I'm going to start with a tree. I know what a tree is. Like, I didn't invent the tree. You know, and it's one of those, and it's funny because I read that. Oh, I kind of read that a couple times. It's like, it's so true.
Yeah, and I think a little bit later on, he talks about Michelangelo, and how he sculpts. You know, they always say, he didn't make this. He just removed the excess away from what was already there.
Right. And that was something I knew that a quote was from Michelangelo. He talks about how the statue was already in the marble that he used. He just removed the excess marble. And that's such a great way to see things.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a great way to think. It's true. We don't know anything.
Right.
And what we are learning is just based off of what we're seeing in front of us. And what we create is just being created from something that's already been there.
Right.
Someone didn't invent the wheel. What happened was they probably saw something roll and like, we could use this.
Well, they probably, ooga.
Right. We could probably modify this and make this work into our favor.
Right.
It's just stuff like that. Or, it's just, I mean, you could theorize the beginnings of anything, but just the thought of what he says, something had to happen to provoke the thought of we're going to make something roll.
Right.
And we're going to smooth it out to the point where it works.
And it's funny, like it makes me think of a Lewis Black skit. And he was talking years ago when the year 2000 hit. It was probably a couple years after that, but he went, there are no flying cars. Why are there no flying cars? Because we wanted a credit card sized device that we could not talk to people on. Just send people messages. That's what we wanted. We wanted a phone that could send messages to people. But if we focused on flying cars, we'd have flying cars.
It's true.
It's
true.
Yep.
That's very interesting. That's actually really fun. It's too fun, and it's true because no one talks on the phone as much as they used to anymore.
Right.
Or there's the video chat versus
I
on
can't
phone.
remember I can't remember the last time I called someone and it was excited when they answered the phone. It's like, I wish I got the voicemail.
I mean, I do make phone calls lately, and I'm excited that they pick up the phone. But that is true. There's times when somene's calling because you have a call ID. Like, no, don't need to talk to this person right now. I'll call them back.
Yep.
I'll text them.
and there are times where people call me and go, why are you not texting me? It's so much faster, But
it's true. It's the instant connection.
Right.
Yeah. On that same page 83. I don't know if you have anything that you highlighted or stood out to you.
Yeah. Music comes. Sorry. I'm trying to.
No, it's fine.
Music comes out of a radio, but is music inside the box? No. Music is in the air. The radio has the ability to tune into the proper frequency and to pick up whatever music it wants, but it does not create it. Imagine if the radio could open up and play all music at once. The result would be chaos. Unless it's tuned in to what we want to receive, it's not really working at all. Many people lose control in life by doing exactly that. They open up to the all without the proper control necessary to assimilate the information. The result, unless prepared, is chaos. Remember, all knowledge is in the air, and since you breathe in this air, all knowledge is also in you. The radio demonstrates what I am talking about perfectly.
I hated reading that paragraph.
Mm-hmm.
Because it made me.
So before we get to the hate part,
not
yeah, but here's the interesting part. We talked about before how technique is about focusing on one thing, right? Now we're talking about opening up to everything. It's the yin yang again,
right? But now he's talking about the fact that because you're not learning how to control it, which is what he's talking about.
Right.
And I think for people with anxiety and people with overthinking, which I'm one of them,
Me?
And you are? Do you overthink?
Absolutely.
No, I know you are. I'm just saying, I'm agreeing that I'm one of them, and I know we've spoken about this multiple times. When I read this, I was like, oh, man. It's so true because so much happening in your head and you don't learn to focus on the one thing to clear it out in a sense.
Right.
You're dealing with everything that's going through your head. And instead of you focusing on the one moment and saying, okay, this is okay, I can remove this from my thought, you're like, well, this is happening. Okay, then this is going to happen. Well, this is happening. This is happening here. This is going here. And this is going here. And well, this is going on over here. But while this is happening, this is happening. That, and you're just like, you can't. And I think I had a conversation with Fred. It brings it together. Like it's almost like a tornado that just brings everything all together to the center of your thought. Things that don't even need to be there. They just come to the center of your thought and make things difficult for you to process. And then you start thinking of other things. You're like, oh my goodness, what's happening here? No, what's happening here? And that's what he's talking about. And you're right. Without the proper technique to control your thoughts, it's difficult. Which is why I miss meditation, because when you put your focus on your breathing, it almost allows you to create a database of your thoughts and separate them.
Yep.
That's the way I would describe it.
Yep, for sure.
That was one of those paragraphs. It's not that I hate the paragraph. I do. I hate the fact that it's so true.
I know.
So
there's a lot of stuff in this book that I hate because it's true.
Right. And he just continues to kind of like marvel at what Michael's saying, and how he talks a lot about his own mental health.
Yeah.
And we know it's a repetitive thing that I've said, but even here he talks about how he tries to block out other information, or the fact that his head is so full he can't cram any more in. He'd have to literally push stuff out.
Yep. And I feel like that too. I've been talking to people at work and they're like, oh, you like cars. You know how to fix them? No, I have a mechanic for that. Like, I don't want to learn how to fix that. Like, I know about computers. That's what I do. I do audio, I do computers, do photography, do technology. That's what I do.
Right.
If I start learning about other things, stuff's going to fall out and I got to like put it back in, and then the other stuff's going to fall out. Like, no, I'm done. I have people to do that for me.
Right. I see on the other hand, I try to absorb as much as possible.
I mean, I do too.
But it's just I need to learn when to stop. Like no, I don't need to do this. This is what I have this person for. Where I'm like, well, I know I have this person for it, but why can't I learn how to do it? And then if I can't do it because I don't have the tools, it's a different story. But if I can do it, I'm going to do it.
Well, it's like your desk. Like you know how to build a desk, but it's like it's a lot easier to buy one,
right? And I wouldn't have had the time to build a desk. Yeah. I didn't have the time to build a desk. So I was like, I'm going to buy one. It wasn't expensive. It was less than I expected to spend, and it was working out great. But I look at it going, I could have easily made a desk, but it would have taken me a lot longer. Even though I bought this desk and it did sit for a month before I put it together. So that's another story.
Right. It's like your smoker. You
it's
bought
like,
it sat for a while.
Oh, now I use it all the time. Now I got to actually clean it. We're gonna talk about
I do too. Mine is so dirty. I have to clean it. Oh.
Yeah. Because I want to clean it soon, so as the weather gets warmer, it's easier to maintain.
Yep.
I think I'm gonna, with my OCD, I want to go out and buy a small wet dry vac specifically for cleaning out my barbecue, and that would be the only thing I use it for. But that's just because I have a weird OCD.
You sure do.
Like making multiple accounts on my computer for specific things. Moving on. In there, he moves on. He talks about his thoughts and stuff like that. And then Michael asks him, how does everything that they talked about pertain to technique? Like the openness, the focus, and all that stuff. And Victor goes on and says a lot. And I don't want to read everything that he says, but one of the things that stood out to me, and you could read more if you feel you need to read more, but one of the things that stood out to me in his description was, my mistakes are often caused by frustration, and making mistakes often causes me to become frustrated. And I was like, oh. In life and in music.
Yep.
You make a mistake and you get frustrated on that mistake and you focus on that thing, and there goes your nervousness, there goes your anxiety, there goes your overthinking. And because you're frustrated, that's what I was like, that line stood out.
Yeah. It reminds me of one of the things I used to do with my kids. So, I taught a lot of kids, and you get to a point where a kid becomes completely saturated, in a lesson. Sometimes you just blow their mind so much that they just can't absorb any more information.
Right.
And the stuff that they could do before when they walked in the door, they just can't do anymore. And it's like, it's weird when you're like, I taught for a store for a long time. And it's like, I would sometimes get the kid to that point at like 8-10 minutes into the lesson. Like, I can't just let the kid go, and like the parents going to get yelled, here's the lesson next 20 minutes. So,
right.
One of the things that I would love to do is, when they got to that point, I'd take the music and I'd flip it upside down and go, all right, play it. And they'd be like, what?
I just Victor Borged
and they would sit
you.
there and they'd sit there and try and play it, and then I flip it back over and go, all right, now play it again. And then they were fine. Because it was just taking their mind away from the frustration just for a second, to do something stupid, and I would do other stupid things, but that was one of my favorite things to do.
You do stupid things?
Every single day. Absolutely.
But you make a very good point. It's like sitting at the computer all day long and not stepping away from it. And you and I both work in jobs where we need to sit at the computer pretty much all day long. So there are times where I break my day up where I have to be in at 8, and by 10 o'clock, if I have not stepped up and moved away from my desk, I force myself to step up and move away from my desk. I finish the task that I'm on, even if it, whatever, but I make sure that I stand up and walk away. Even if it's just down the little walk path to the next person and say, how you doing? And walk back down.
Yep.
Like, there's a small office, so I know everybody in the office. But it's just one of those things where you need to step away. Mm-hmm. And that's very, it's a good point. You just needed to kind of shut their brain off for a second and then restart it. It's a good point. A good way of looking at it. I don't know what else you have. I don't want to jump over you.
My next is on 86.
I'm sorry?
86 is my next.
Okay. So, yeah, I know. I agree with you. The stuff that I have highlighted here is more on the personal end. That's just something that stood out. Nothing that I feel, it's just some of the words that he uses to kind of refocus himself in a sense. Mm-hmm. Like, he kept feeling the energy, so he kept talking. Like, he didn't want to stop the thought process. Mm-hmm. Though he does go into something about, if not concentrating, is where I want to end up. I needed to add it to my practice. So he needs to teach himself not to concentrate in order to concentrate.
Exactly.
Back to the yin and yang.
Yep.
So both parts of concentrating and not concentrating are necessary to complete that circle. And it's so true because you don't really think about it, because when you're performing, you want to focus on the music. Mm-hmm. The interpretation or the impression that you're giving to the audience, because they don't care how you're playing it. They don't.
Right.
It's very interesting. And then he talks.
Michael says that needs to become second nature.
Right. And then he talks about using the TV as a distraction. Yep. And it's really funny. I used to do that all the time when it came to working on papers and writing papers. Mm-hmm. The TV was the distraction. It allowed me to kind of split my thought process. Mm-hmm. And I would work and I would watch a little bit, and I work and watch a little bit, and I would get my work done. But I needed the TV or something to hear and look at.
Yep.
So it's very interesting that he brought that up. So you said you're on 86. What do you have on 86?
Actually, that's exactly what I have.
Okay.
So we talk about the TV. Anyway, if we're going to watch it, why not use it to our advantage? That's not the only way. Daydreaming, night dreaming, sitting in nature, meditation, and other things can help me learn how to not concentrate so that we can spend more time focusing on the music. If we had to concentrate all the time on the techniques and the instruments we use to talk, we would never be able to say anything worthwhile. Being able to concentrate or not is necessary before one can reach its full potential. If television can help me with that, that's what I'll use. You may choose to use something else if you want to. And this is something that I've done because my brain, we've talked about my brain and how negative it is. And one of the things, it's very bizarre, and I don't know why this is, but there are certain instruments that have a block. And trumpet is one of them. Even though I can play the trumpet, one of the things that is in my mind every single time I play the trumpet, you're going to get tired. Your lips are going to give out on you. And there are some times where it's instant. I'll put the trumpet on my lips and go, wow, I'm tired already. So what I would do is I would use the television as a way to distract my brain, and I would just sit there and play scales, play arpeggios, just and not focus on what I'm playing or that I'm playing, but watch TV So that way I was building the muscle strength and my endurance in my lips without my brain getting in the way saying, you're tired. You got to stop.
So you
and
believe
I found that like,
so you believe and you agree that that's a mind over matter situation.
absolutely. Yeah.
Where
Because there are times where like I would be able to play for like 10, 15 minutes. And then if I put on like a binge a show of like Mythbusters, I remember watching Mythbusters while doing this. I went through like 4 hours. I played nonstop 4 hours. Had no idea.
right.
You know, but the day before, I struggled to get 10 minutes out of the one without getting tired.
Right.
You
And
know?
it's because your mind was focused on something else as you were just
Yep.
doing something that should be second nature to you.
Yep.
Right. Makes sense. Absolutely.
Because on the French horn, similar mouthpiece. I could play French horn all day long. Never get tired. Doesn't bother me.
right.
Trumpet, I don't know what's different about it. I've even taken my French horn mouthpiece, put it on the trumpet. So everything should be essentially the same, with the exception of a little bit of back pressure on the instruments. Other than that, it should be the same. But I still get tired on that damn trumpet.
So you
I don't know why.
You got your mind so set up on the fact that trumpet tires you out that no matter when you pick it
Yeah.
up, your brain is already like shutting you down.
Yep.
That's interesting.
But it's like guitar is the same way. You know, it's
a
like
true thing.
I picked up that guitar and it's like it doesn't feel comfortable, and I don't know how to make it feel comfortable.
right.
And it's like, you know, I mean, being a musician that's played for 30 or 40 years, like it should come natural to me, and that bothers me that it doesn't, because other instruments have done that. But the technique, I just something about it, I can't.
Yeah, we
grasp
have our brick walls.
Yeah.
Like for me,
And I haven't found a way around the guitar yet.
yeah, I haven't found my way around the piano yet. I wish I could play. I mean, I understand it. I know the concept. I understand chords. I know how to read the notes. I know how to do that stuff. For some reason, for me to learn a piece that probably should take me a few hours to kind of get under and then really master after a week or two, it will take me a month or two. Like I can't. It just, there's something that stops me from doing it. And I've tried everything, and I don't know if it's just there's more to my mental block than just that, but that's what it comes to. It's very interesting.
Right. And what's weird, and this is what bothers me, is, you know, I want to be able to teach myself, because I know that if I had a kid that was going through that same problem, I could figure it out.
Right.
But I can't separate myself from myself to figure out what's wrong.
Right.
And that bothers me.
So I don't have anything until jumping into 88. So I don't know if you have anything that goes.
Nope. Go ahead. Go for it.
So in 88, towards the bottom, he states, this is, Victor is talking about techniques. No, I'm sorry. Michael's talking about techniques and how people are making flashy techniques and this and that, and they focus on the flashy techniques and they don't focus on the music and this. Many musicians get way too caught up in the technique when it could benefit them to get caught up in the music. And that just goes back to what you were saying, where you were so hyper-focused on the technique that you lost the ability to play the music, in a sense, as music versus, you know. And that just stood out because it's true. We said it already, you know, a few minutes ago, that we focus on the wrong things sometimes, which makes the things difficult to process. And then I jump into 89.
Yep.
And these are like little one-liners that kind of stood out. The more we feel music, the faster the technique falls into place. Now, with your experience, do you feel like that's the case?
Absolutely. I remember when I was in high school, we've talked about my choir director last episode. You know, he said, you know, the louder you sing, the longer your notes need to be.
Right.
And he would always say that we need to focus on the details and not, you know, the big note picture. You know, focus on the details of the music.
Right.
You know, don't focus on your breathing, because that'll come. But, you know, focus on the meaning behind the piece, because that'll change your tone, you know. And if you start listening harder, or I always like what Dr. McRoy would say, listen louder. I love that when he said that. But that was essentially what my choir director was saying, was that focusing more on listening to other people and not you to make you a better musician. So focusing on the little details to get the bigger picture.
And it's funny, one of the things about breathing that I learned when it came to singing. Breathe for the sentence. Because when we go to talk or speak, we take enough breath in to complete the second sentence that we're saying. Then we breathe again and we just talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. But we're not thinking about the fact of the words we're going to say. Our body seems to know how much breath to take in order to say what we're going to say.
Right.
There's the involuntary breath to say what you want to say and you move forward. So when you look at a phrase and you're talking and you going down to basic grammar and everything, you read the commas and the periods. The comma is like your breath. The period is the end of the sentence. So if you're breathing based upon those punctuations, you don't need more breath than that.
Right.
And I was like, that's ridiculous. You can't do that. You can't tell me that that's true. And then you start doing like, well, that is true.
When I was working with Ron, one of the exercises that we would do, and it's such a great exercise, you'd say, all right, take a deep breath. Now exhale. Now sing. Just to prove to you how little air you need to actually sustain a note.
Right.
Right.
And then you're also taught that you need more air for higher notes. And then you need more air to do that. And it's not that it's wrong. It's that there's a lot of contradiction in music when it comes to learning technique.
Yep.
Like, don't do this because you don't need to do this, but you need to do this to do this. And it's finding that balance of being able to say, okay, yes, I can take, I only need this amount of breath to say the next thing or to sing the next thing.
Right. And here's another interesting, just getting back to what we're talking about the little details. And I don't know, I was just thinking about this. This might not be the reason, but every piece that I sang in high school, I can still sing from memory. 3 years of choral music, I can do every single piece from memory still.
So like if on the spot right now I said sing it, you could do it, or you're saying that if you're in the group, you could sing it?
I could do it right now for you.
Okay. I have a different childhood than you, so I think part of the reason why I can't remember certain things is because of the childhood I had. But but I get what you're saying.
My thought was like, is it because we focused so much on the details that it just stuck with me because it was?
It could be your teacher.
More ingrained.
It could be your teacher. 100%.
I know what we did in college. I couldn't sing that stuff again.
And it's not that we sounded bad. It's not that we didn't have a great time. No. It was just the way. No, and I agree with you. And I mean, that's kind of what I was going to bring it back to is like, I know I had a fantastic time in chorus during high school. I know we had a great teacher. I know that we sounded good. We were one of the best choral groups around. But her technique was different than your high school teacher's technique. And because of that, you have a different experience that has you keeping that memory. And that doesn't mean that they're wrong. They just had two different routes of getting what they wanted out of the choir.
Yep. Maybe my sleep apnea started after high school. That's what affected my brain. Who knows? I don't know.
That's possible. That doesn't explain me, though, because there's stuff that I remember, stuff I shouldn't remember. Like, it's just...
Yeah, but you're an idiot.
Yeah, well, that's a different story. That the bottom of that page where I read that last line, one thing I think stood out, and this is a line that I think I would probably write down somewhere they can see it. You're being trapped by your mind. We do. We get trapped by our mind all the time.
Yep. Absolutely.
All the time. And everybody has their own thing, and everybody deals with their own thing, and everybody in some way, shape, or form gets trapped by their own mind. Some people don't let it bother them. Some people do. Yep. And I think in some way, shape, or form, we need to know about it. I think for those that let themselves get trapped in their mind and they don't know how to get out, need to figure out how to get out to balance that out. And those that just kind of let it go need to realize that they are trapped in it and not just have to let it go. Because there's that balance. It brings it back to that balance of yin and yang. Like you need a little bit of both. That's my thought and my opinion. That's not a medical. It's my thought and opinion. Where were we? So this is, let me just make sure I'm in this right spot. So this is Michael speaking to directly to Victor. Now, what do you think would happen if you could convince yourself first at the beginning of your quest? In other words, before you start practicing anything, convince yourself you can already do it. What would happen then? I'll tell you. Depending on how well you do at the convincing part, you will cut your practice time in half. Use the full potential of your mind, and practice will become a thing of the past. So this comes to the point where the reason why Michael's talking about this, just to give a little context to this, is that, Victor's looking to better his practicing skills or better his practicing or become better faster. And, Michael's saying that we need to believe in ourselves to convince ourselves that we already know how to do this.
Right.
In a sense. And I thought that was important because that a lot of this relates to everything that's going on, not just practice. It's like in life, if they say that being happy is a mindset. Yeah. And it's a struggle for people to be happy because they each have their own traumas that they're dealing with. And nobody's trauma is worse or other than their trauma is their trauma. It is what it is. You're not, mine's not worse than yours. Yours is not worse than mine. It's there. It creates a blockage in your mental state, in your physical state. So you can't move forward. So they say being happy is a state of mind. But the struggle for most people is getting to that state of mind to be happy. Right. So you need to convince yourself that you can be happy. So those few times that you sit back and be like, I'm happy, I'm good, are those few times. So it's like if you practice that every day, almost like an affirmation, at some point your brain is going to go, yeah, no, I am happy, I can do this. Right. Like, and that's that very interesting thing, because I do try to go into my practice sometimes when I'm thinking of the piece that I'm going to sing, and I'm like, no, I can do this, I got this. No, I can hit that note, I can do that, I got that, I understand that, that makes full sense. Like, kind of think about it in that sense. So that was very interesting. I don't know if you took anything, like what you took out of that, or if that stood out to you at all.
So there are a couple things. And getting back to what you were talking about is going back to my high school choir director. One of the things that he themed my second year that I was there, the theme of the year was choose joy. Like, you could choose to be miserable all you want, or you could choose to be happy. Why wouldn't you do that?
Sure.
And he was very much the kind of person that would wallow in pity and surround himself with negativity. And he tried that entire year to find joy, in every situation. And
it's hard to do, especially in this day and age, when there's so much negativity going on around, and it's hard to find even the positivity. It goes back to what the quote from Mr. Rogers, where he says that his mom said, always look for the people doing good in the situation. That's a paraphrase of the quote. I know the exact quote, but that's essentially what it is. And it's true.
Always look for the helpers.
I'm sorry?
Always look for the helper.
Right. And it's true. And I try my best to be the helper and to be that support and to be that lean on for other people. And sometimes you forget to do it yourself for yourself, and that creates that other aspect to it. But it's true. It's a mindset, and we're all learning. And we're all learning differently because we're all coming from different situations.
And then getting back to what you were talking about, learning to be happy. That's a lot about the way I meditate. A lot of what my meditation is about is it's recognizing when my brain is out of control, and then realizing it, and realizing how to not realizing it, and then redirecting it. And it's almost like if you take a piece of metal and you bend it, like the first time you bend it, it's really hard. And if you bend it again on that same seam, it becomes easier. And the more you do it, the easier it gets. So that's like the whole point behind meditation. And I've taught meditation in a way, and people are like, well, every time I meditate, my brain does something else. I went, that's perfect. Meditation is one of those things that you get better at it by being bad at it.
Right.
If your goal is to have your brain not focus on something else, just focus on that one thing, you're doing it wrong.
Right.
You want your brain to do something else so you can practice redirecting it and recognizing what it's out of.
So you want to fold that piece of metal and then fold it again so that next fold is harder. Fold it down again so that next fold is harder.
No. You want to fold it in the same place. Keep folding it so that fold becomes weak.
So you're saying that each I'm legit saying, so you're saying that each time you meditate, if something new comes into your brain, you want that fold to be able to take that.
So here's my piece of metal, right? I take it and I
He's
fold
using
it.
a visual for those that are not watching a video.
Yeah. This is what you got to watch on YouTube, right? So I fold it in half. That first fold was hard because it was my first fold.
Sure.
Right? So now I open it up. I'm going to fold it on that same plane. Now that fold was a lot easier. The more I do it, the easier this becomes.
Right. And so you're saying
you're
that those
weakening this.
So you're saying that when other people say they go to meditate, something else comes into your brain. Instead of folding it constantly, that fold makes it easier for them to learn how to deal with each individual new thing that comes to your brain versus keep on folding.
Yep.
I should have paraphrased I should have phrased it better.
Yeah, this initial fold is the hard part. But
that's
the
what I
more
meant.
You recognize when your brain is out of control, that fold then becomes easier and easier and easier.
Right.
And it's easier to recognize, easier to redirect. That's how I teach meditation.
I just used the wrong words. I was with you. Just used the wrong words. Well, yeah.
I guess I could have used my book. I've opened and closed the book a lot of times. So it's easy to open and close.
It flies away. It flies away.
Pretty soon pages are going to start flying because I opened the book so much.
It's too funny. I am, if we're moving forward from this,
move forward. Let's go.
I'm on page number 92.
92.
And
Let's all drink a cold yoo-hoo. I've lost my mind.
I mean, he does on the...
Yeah, sorry.
He says on the page, he goes, truth, what is truth? Truth is up to you. You make your truth. No one else does. All right? That's an interesting sentence. But the further you go down, he goes, you cannot half-heartedly tell yourself that you can do something and then expect to be able to do it. You must be honest. From all levels of your being, you must know that you are talking about what you're talking about. If you want to practice anything, practice knowing that you can do whatever you set your complete mind to. Don't practice believing, practice knowing. Which goes to what we were just talking about, is that whole thought of, I can say to myself, I'm going to wake up happy tomorrow.
Right.
But if I don't really, really feel that way, or if it's not knowing that I'm going to wake up, I can wake up happy tomorrow versus I'm going to and I believe I'm going to. Two different mindsets.
Yep, absolutely.
And this is very interesting because this is where you start seeing a side of Victor that is agitation in this book, because he starts getting upset because Michael's not being direct with his answers. And you get why Michael's not being direct with his answers, because he wants Victor to figure out the answer himself. He doesn't want to just cut to the chase. He doesn't just want to tell him. He wants him to figure out, because I agree. If you can help guide somebody to the answer versus telling them the answer, they're going to be better for it. You know? So he talks about that, and like you tell that Victor starts getting upset, and I mean, even at some point he says, "Stop jerking me around." Like just stop doing this.
Yep.
You know, losing his cool and hitting the hood of his car. And I love that he puts this in here. And I love the fact that he humbles himself in this way. And he shows the fact that, I may be calm and cool when you see me, but this does happen. Like I do get, I can get to this point.
Yep.
And then he does like a weird Yoda thing. The need to practice when you are ready. You will lose, not before and not after. Anyway, that was his Michael's little Yoda thing. But and that keeps going, like that whole back and forth with the aggravation and all that stuff. It keeps going, and then I get to the page of bottom of 94 with some more stuff.
Start by knowing you can already do the technique. Believing it won't do. You must know it with all your being. Using concentration to focus and project your thoughts is very valuable, as well as learning to use not concentrating. This will open your mind to all that is available to you. You must know how and when to use both of these tools to achieve the greatest accomplishments. You understand that now, don't you?
No, I don't. No,
I don't either.
no, and Victor doesn't.
Yeah. Yep.
And it goes on. It goes on. You know, he goes on to say, Michael goes, if I have a musical passage that I want to play but don't yet possess the required technique, I will focus on the technique just long enough to understand the exact moments required to do it in the most efficient way. Which I believe goes to a form of meditation that you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And even to the point of using affirmations to get yourself to put yourself in a different mindset. And then
a lot of that last point in the most efficient way, that sums up Victor's technique on the bass.
Yes.
It's all about conservation of motion. You know,
Yes.
His double thumb technique, you know, he realized that when you slap a bass, you normally slap it and come off of it. He realized that by coming off it, he could actually hit the note again.
Yeah.
So just by going like this, he's actually playing 2 notes.
Right.
And then he adds 2 fingers. Now you can hit it once, hit it again, then pluck it. Now you've got a triplet. You can do it 4 times now, and now.
Right. It's
so
efficiency.
He can play this. This can be 4 times as fast just by moving.
And when he means this, he means just tapping the thumb onto the string.
Watch YouTube.
You got to watch YouTube, but him tapping the thumb on the string and then utilize it. But yeah, take a look at YouTube if you want to see the visual aspect of that explanation.
I'm glad we did this one as a video because
no, that's perfect. That's good.
Visual cues.
Yeah. Further along in
trying
that,
to figure out how to read with a microphone in my way.
So in other words, he's saying release the technique is what Michael's saying. And then he goes, the key is this. I never lose sight of my real agenda, which is to make music. Mm-hmm. It's just like anything else. You have an agenda. Meditation is to clear your mind and focus. You know, sitting down and reading a book, you're going to set yourself up with a cup of coffee or tea, and you're going to sit down to make sure you can finish a couple of chapters in an hour or whatever, or however long it takes you to read them to understand them. You know, don't lose focus of what your agenda is. This happens to be music. Mm-hmm. And then this is where I think it's at the bottom of the page where he talks about skipping steps. So I don't know if you have anything before that.
Nope. You could go.
So he says, Michael talks in such a way about like skipping a few steps, and Victor goes, it's okay to skip steps. He goes, won't I risk missing something? And Michael says, skipping steps may not always be as thorough, but the better you learn to use your mind, the more knowledge you will bring with you, no matter how many steps are skipped. As long as you're always listening, you should have no problems. And I think that goes back to what your
That's
high school
my favorite part.
Yeah,
you know,
you're always listening.
As long as you're always listening, you should have no problems.
And I think that's a big thing about, in general, like listening to people. You know, we get it. So I sometimes get excited in conversation, and I sometimes I'll kind of jump in, and it's not because I'm trying to cut the person off. It's just that there's a passion in the conversation, and you know, and I try to be really good about it. It's not because I'm trying to be like, whoa, you don't know what you're talking about. It's just like, oh yeah, no, I totally get it, and I want to jump in on it. So I'm trying to be better about listening. You know, even today I was talking to my friend, and she's like, you need to listen first. And I was like, it was just because I was just excited or interested or whatever. So it's a thing, you know? But yeah, I think listening is a huge part.
Yep.
You know, if I'm sitting down and I say to the person, go ahead, talk, and I put my mindset, I'm here to listen, I'm good about it because that's my mindset for that moment. But if I'm in a passionate or an engaged conversation, sometimes I forget to listen. In that sense, like the right social cues, right? Social cues, they're cues. This and then this follows after that. Whether you are talking about music or life, good technique is important. Understand that you must just learning technique is not enough. You must make a choice and a conscious choice to take one road or another, good or bad. Each is narrow, making it difficult for you to turn. And he continues to say, know that the mind is a powerful tool, and that its power can respond to you both positively or negatively. Learning to use it completely should not be taken lightly. And so true. I still think the yin and yang, even on the positively or negative, like understanding how your brain works in that sense is so important. And it's so hard to do. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's important.
Mm-hmm.
And then I don't have any more after this.
No, that's it.
But I love the fact that he tells him to put out the fire in his head and put the fire out on the ground.
Yep.
Wow. And then this leads into the next chapter, which this is so interesting that they go from technique to emotion and feel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like I said, I did not expect to take as much as I did out of that chapter because it was technique. And then I read through it like multiple times. I'm like, oh man, there's such good stuff in here.
Yeah, there is. Yep, for sure.
That was a lot to unpack. This whole book is a lot to unpack.
Yeah, it is. Sure is.
So, I don't have any more to say to this.
Yep. I think we're done.
I think we're done. I think one of us needs to read the closing.
One of us can do that.
Yeah, I guess we can.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out. I don't know.
So with that, just remember that our links to our social media will be in the show notes. Links to YouTube, if you want to follow us on YouTube and see the video of this. Going forward, as long as this is successful, we will continue to upload videos of the podcast as well, so you can watch and or listen. Live stream every Sunday evening at 7:30. We'll be doing some Victor Wooten music, some Victor Wooten talks and interviews. And
you go live on Fridays.
I was going to get to the Fridays.
Yeah, but you're Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Like there's a day order.
Sunday's the beginning of the week.
Yes, but this comes out on a Tuesday, so your next day would be the Friday.
Whatever. Friday evenings at 8 o'clock. I do a live show. CJ sometimes joins me when he has time. And we listen to full albums for the most part on Friday evenings. And different stuff. Sometimes it's yin and yang stuff. Like we've done like Sarah Bareilles and Dream Theater, on a Friday evening. So, trying to keep it interesting and that sort of stuff. So, yeah. Make sure you check out our links.
Thank you
follow
for
us on Twitch,
listening
follow us
to
on
this.
YouTube.
Yeah, follow us on YouTube. Thank you for listening to this podcast and joining us through this journey of the music lesson. And I look forward to going through these chapters and jumping into the second book too.
Yep, me too.
So, are you reading the closing? Who read it the last one? I forget.
Potentially, you did.
I did.
Yep, you did the first three.
I did the first three. I can't remember that I did them. It's been a few weeks.
Yep.
All right.
So we'll see you all either Friday or Sunday, or just the next episode.
Or just hit us up, chat with us in Discord, email us, whatever. Throw down a comment. We're ready to go.
Yep, let's do it.
Sweet.
And we'll see you guys next time. Have a good one.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you for listening to the Turn on the Music podcast. We hope that you join us next week. Click on the link tree in our show notes to follow us on Twitter and Instagram. You can also subscribe to our Twitch and YouTube channel. If you'd like to continue the conversation, join us on our Discord. If you like what you heard, please share it with a friend. And if you really want to help us promote the show, head over to Apple Podcasts or the podcast service of your choice and give us a 5-star rating. Remember, always share the music.